I'm Amber Mitchell, 34, and I still can't believe what happened. One minute I discovered my husband of 10 years had emptied our accounts for his mistress. Thomas had no idea what was coming when he walked out that door. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more devastating. It changed everything in ways I never imagined possible. You'll want to hear how this all unfolds. Growing up in suburban Boston, I lived what most would consider a typical middle-class life. My parents died in a car accident when I was 8, leaving my grandfather Harold to raise me. He was a quiet, modest man who worked as an accountant well into his 70s, becoming a pediatric nurse. There's something deeply fulfilling about helping children through their most vulnerable moments. For 12 years, I've worked at Boston Children's Hospital, building a career I genuinely love. The late nights, the emotional toll. It's all worth it when you see a child recover and go home. I met Thomas at a hospital charity fundraiser 12 years ago. He stood out immediately, tall, confident, with a charm that filled the room. He worked as an investment banker at a prestigious firm downtown and had come with some colleagues who were major donors. When he approached me with 2 glasses of champagne and a disarming smile, I couldn't help but feel butterflies. "You look like someone who deserves a break," he said, offering me a glass. Thomas had this way of making me feel like the most interesting person in the world. He asked thoughtful questions about my work, seeming genuinely impressed by my dedication to pediatric care. We spent weekends exploring coastal towns along the New England shore. He surprised me with tickets to Broadway shows and thoughtful gifts that showed he was paying attention to the little things I mentioned. After 2 years of dating, Thomas proposed during a sunset dinner on a rooftop garden overlooking Boston Harbor. The ring was stunning, a family heirloom from his grandmother, he claimed, and I said yes without hesitation. I was completely in love with the life we were building. Our wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was beautiful. My grandfather walked me down the aisle, his eyes brimming with tears. Looking back, Thomas's career advanced steadily, bringing promotions and bonuses that allowed us to upgrade our lifestyle. We moved from our downtown apartment to a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial, in an upscale neighborhood with excellent schools. We had discussed having children, but always found reasons to wait. Bringing groceries and making sure he was taking his medications properly. He always insisted he was fine, showing remarkable independence for a man in his 80s. My grandfather passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 92. The grief hit me harder than I expected. He had been my constant, my true north since childhood. At the funeral, Thomas stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders, doing and saying all the right things. The perfect supportive husband. What I didn't know then was that my world was about to shatter in ways I never could have imagined. The changes in Thomas were subtle at first, so gradual that I almost didn't notice them. About 6 months before my grandfather died, Thomas began working later than usual. His firm was handling a major corporate merger, he explained, which required extra hours and dedication. "This could be the deal that gets me to senior vice president," he'd say, kissing me quickly before heading out the door at dawn. Some nights he didn't come home until after I was asleep. His text messages became less frequent during these trips. When I'd call, he often couldn't talk because he was heading into another meeting or at a client dinner. Our physical intimacy dwindled. Thomas was always too tired or too stressed. When we did connect, it felt mechanical, lacking the emotional closeness we once shared. I told myself this was normal for a long-term marriage, periods of distance followed by reconnection. I blamed his work pressure and my grief over watching my grandfather's health decline. Thomas became increasingly protective of his phone. It was always face down, and he'd take it with him even for quick trips to the bathroom. Once, when his phone dinged while he was showering, I glanced at the screen and saw a message preview that simply read, "Can't wait to see you again." When I asked him about it later, making me feel guilty for questioning him, our finances had always been merged: joint checking, savings, and investment accounts. Thomas, with his financial background, managed most of it. I had full access but rarely checked the accounts since he handled the bill payments and investments. It wasn't unusual for large sums to move between accounts for investments or tax purposes, so I didn't question the financial notifications that occasionally popped up on my phone. One day, while paying for lunch with a colleague, my credit card was declined. Embarrassed, I used another card and checked our account later. There had been a significant withdrawal, $50,000, for what Thomas had labeled investment opportunity. When I asked him about it that evening, he became defensive. I've been managing our money successfully for 10 years, Amber. Do you suddenly not trust me? His tone made me retreat, apologizing for questioning his judgment. The credit card statements revealed other concerning patterns. Expensive restaurants in Boston on nights he claimed to be working late, charges at high-end jewelry stores, and a weekend at a luxury resort in Vermont when he told me he was at a conference in Denver. My best friend Lisa noticed the change in me before I fully acknowledged the problem. Over coffee one Sunday, she remarked how withdrawn I'd become. You don't seem like yourself lately, Amber. Is everything okay with you and Thomas? The concern in her eyes broke something in me, and I confided my suspicions. Lisa suggested marriage counseling, offering the name of a therapist she knew. It'll pass. After persistent requests, he reluctantly agreed to attend one session, during which he was charming, engaged, and said all the right things. His irritability increased at home. Small things I did suddenly annoyed him. Leaving a light on, buying the wrong brand of coffee, spending too much time on the phone with Lisa. His criticism became a constant undercurrent in our home. Desperate to reconnect, I planned a surprise weekend at the beachside inn where we'd spent our first anniversary. I arranged for time off work, packed his favorite snacks for the drive, and even bought new lingerie. When I revealed the surprise on Friday morning, Thomas looked pained rather than pleased. Amber, I can't just drop everything for a spontaneous trip. I have meetings I can't reschedule. He didn't even try to make it work. I went alone, sitting on the beach watching couples walk hand in hand, wondering what had happened to us. When I returned Sunday evening, the house smelled of unfamiliar perfume. Thomas claimed he had hosted a work dinner. When I held it up to show him, Thomas snatched it away. For God's sake, Amber, that could be from anywhere. A client leaned in during a conversation, maybe. Why are you being so paranoid? I called Thomas immediately straight to voicemail. I checked his location on our shared phone app. It showed him at his office building downtown. I shouldn't have done what I did next. But something in me needed to know the truth. I told my supervisor I had a family emergency, got in my car, and drove to the Archer Hotel. The rational part of me expected nothing to come of this. Probably just a cruel prank or a case of mistaken identity. But as I approached the hotel, I spotted Thomas's black BMW in the parking garage. At the front desk, I lied. I'm supposed to meet my husband, Thomas Mitchell, for lunch. I think he's with a colleague, Veronica Parker. He forgot to text me the room number. The clerk hesitated but glanced at her computer. Room 718. Would you like me to call up? No, thank you. I'll surprise him. The elevator ride to the 7th floor was the longest of my life. With each passing floor, I prayed for an innocent explanation. Perhaps a legitimate business meeting in a hotel suite. Maybe the anonymous texter was mistaken. I knocked on door 718 with my heart pounding in my ears. The door opened, and there stood Thomas in a hotel bathrobe. Behind him, I glimpsed a woman scrambling to cover herself with bedsheets, long dark hair, much younger than me. Thomas's face drained of color. Amber, what are you doing here? That's all you have to say? I said with surprising calm. I'm the one who's leaving. Thomas followed me into the hallway, clutching his robe closed. This isn't what it looks like. I laughed bitterly. It's exactly what it looks like, Thomas. How long? He stared at the carpet, silent. How long? I repeated. 6 months, he finally admitted. But it's not serious. 6 months. While I was caring for my dying grandfather, while I was working extra shifts to build our savings, while I was planning surprise weekends to save our marriage. Who is she? She's the new marketing executive at the firm, Thomas said. Just happened, Amber. I was going to end it. Like you were going to end it with Jessica from accounting 3 years ago? Or Stephanie from the gym before that? His head snapped up. You knew. I suspected, but I trusted you. I believed your excuses because I wanted our marriage to work. I haven't been for a long time. You're so predictable, so boring. Always talking about patients and hospital drama. Veronica excites me. She challenges me. Each word was a dagger. And our vows? Our life together? That was all just, what? A convenience until someone more exciting came along. People grow apart, he said coldly. I deserve to be happy. So do I whispered. Turning to leave. Thomas grabbed my arm. What are you going to do? I pulled away. I don't know yet. But don't come home tonight. I drove back to our house in a daze, tears blurring my vision. Once home, I called Lisa, who came immediately with ice cream and wine. We sat on my couch as I poured out everything. I knew something was wrong, Lisa said. But I had no idea it was this bad. Around midnight, Thomas texted. Staying at a hotel tonight. We need to talk tomorrow. I barely slept. When morning came, I dragged myself to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my swollen face, and forced myself to check our financial accounts. Something inside telling me to verify our situation. That's when the bottom truly fell out of my world. Our checking account, $237. Drained to the early withdrawal minimum. Even my personal checking account, which held my independent emergency fund, empty. Thomas had systematically emptied everything, leaving me with practically nothing. 10 years of careful saving gone. Panicked, I called him repeatedly. No answer. I texted. What have you done to our money? Call me now. An hour later. His response. Needed space to think. Will explain everything when I'm ready. Then I found it. While searching his desk for any financial documents, I discovered a burner phone in his golf bag. The text history between him and Veronica told the whole story. Thomas. It's all done. Accounts emptied. She doesn't suspect anything. Veronica. What about the house? Thomas. Working on that next. Lawyer says I can force a sale. After the divorce, we'll have plenty to start fresh in California. Veronica. You're amazing. Can't wait for our new life together. Love you. Thomas. Love you more. Just a little longer and we'll be free. They had been planning this for months, draining our accounts gradually and preparing to leave me with nothing while they started over on the West Coast with my money. I collapsed on the floor, physically ill from the betrayal. Everything we'd built together, every dollar we'd saved, all of it gone. And for what? So Thomas could play house with a younger woman using the money we had worked for together? In the space of 24 hours, I had lost my marriage, my financial security. 30 the next morning. I was still in my bathrobe, eyes swollen from crying, clutching my third cup of coffee. Through the peephole, I saw an older gentleman in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase. My first thought was that Thomas had sent a lawyer already. Mrs. Mitchell? He asked when I opened the door. I'm Walter Friedman from Pearson, Friedman and Associates. I was your grandfather's attorney. May I come in? I hesitated, confused by the timing. My grandfather passed 3 months ago. Yes. I'm aware. I've been trying to reach you. There are some matters regarding his estate that require immediate attention. His kind eyes took in my disheveled appearance. Is this a bad time? I laughed hollowly. The worst, actually. But please come in. I led him to the kitchen table, hastily clearing away tissues and empty wine glasses from the night before. I'm sorry about the mess. My husband and I are going through something. Mr. Friedman nodded sympathetically, setting his briefcase on the table. Actually, what I'm here to discuss may be relevant to your current situation. He removed several documents, arranging them methodically. Mrs. Mitchell, I understand you were very close with your grandfather, Harold Jenkins. He raised me after my parents died. He was everything to me. And did you have any knowledge of his financial situation? I shook my head. He lived modestly. I always assumed he had enough for his needs, but nothing extraordinary. Mr. Friedman smiled gently. Your grandfather was an exceptional man in many ways. In the 1970s, he made several early investments in technology companies that would later become industry giants. He continued making strategic investments throughout his life, building a fortune that he kept almost entirely private. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. A fortune? What do you mean? Mrs. Mitchell, your grandfather's estate is valued at approximately $450 million. The mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. That's impossible. And substantial cash reserves. I stared at the numbers, unable to process them. Why didn't he tell me? Why live in that small house driving that old car if he had all this? Your grandfather was concerned that wealth might change the person you would become. He wanted you to develop your own values, your own work ethic. He was immensely proud of the compassionate, hard-working woman you grew into. Tears welled in my eyes again, different tears this time. There's more, Mr. Friedman continued, pulling out an envelope. He left this letter for you. With trembling hands, I opened it. My dearest Amber, asterisk, if you're reading this, I've finally gone to join your grandmother and your parents. Don't grieve too long. I've had a wonderful life. I grew up during the Depression and learned early that true wealth isn't about what you have, but who you are. I wanted you to learn that too. But I never forgot that money is just a tool, it should work for you, not define you. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've watched your marriage to Thomas with concern. A man who truly loves you would value who you are more than what you have. I've seen how he looks at other women when he thinks no one notices. I've observed his extravagance and his discontent. I worry he married you expecting my accountant's savings would eventually become his. I pray I'm wrong. Asterisk. Asterisk, this inheritance comes with just one string attached. It is yours alone. I've instructed Walter to structure it in a way that protects it from any claims by Thomas. Consider it your safety net should you ever need one. Asterisk. Asterisk, use this wealth wisely. Continue your good work helping children. Find joy. And remember that I love you always. Asterisk. Grandpa. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing. Even from beyond the grave. My grandfather was protecting me. He had seen Thomas clearly when I couldn't. Or wouldn't. Mr. Friedman waited patiently for me to compose myself before continuing. Your grandfather established a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The structure legally shields these assets from any claim by your husband, regardless of your state's marital property laws. There are liquid assets of approximately $20 million that can be transferred to new accounts in your name immediately. I've prepared the paperwork. As if on cue, Lisa arrived, using her emergency key to let herself in. She stopped short at the sight of Mr. Friedman. Am I interrupting? She asked cautiously. Lisa, I said, my voice still shaky. This is my grandfather's attorney. Apparently, I've just inherited $450 million. Her jaw dropped. You've what? I turned back to Mr. Friedman. Can you give us a moment? Of course. I'll step outside to make some calls. When I return, we can discuss next steps and security measures. After he left, Lisa stared at me in disbelief. Is this for real? I handed her my grandfather's letter and the asset summary. As she read, her eyes widened. Holy shit, Amber. This changes everything. The timing, I said, still processing. Thomas emptied our accounts yesterday, and today I find out I'm worth hundreds of millions. Lisa grabbed my hands. This isn't just money, Amber. This is freedom. This is justice. For the first time since discovering Thomas's betrayal, I felt something other than despair. Not happiness, the wound was still too fresh for that. But something like possibility. When Mr. Friedman returned, we spent the next several hours establishing new bank accounts, reviewing the portfolio structure, and discussing wealth management options. By evening, I had access to more money than I could have imagined, a team of financial advisors at my disposal, and the beginning of a plan. As Mr. Friedman packed up to leave, he paused. Mrs. Mitchell, one more thing your grandfather asked me to tell you. Sometimes what seems like the end is really a beginning in disguise. I nodded, feeling the truth of those words settling in my bones. Thomas had no idea what was coming. 3 days passed without a word from Thomas. I used that time wisely, consulting with divorce attorneys, securing the house with new locks and a security system, and beginning to process both my grief and my unexpected new reality. On the 4th day, as Lisa and I were reviewing recommendations from the financial team, Thomas's BMW pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him straighten his tie and practice what looked like an apologetic expression before approaching the door. Want me to stay? Lisa asked. Absolutely. The doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened it. Thomas looked terrible. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, wearing the same suit he'd had on at the hotel. His confident demeanor had crumbled into something desperate. Amber, he said, his voice breaking. Please, can we talk? I stepped aside to let him enter. His eyes darted to Lisa sitting at the kitchen table, then back to me. Privately, he asked. Lisa stays, I said firmly. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of her. He ran a hand through his unwashed hair. Fine. Look, I made a horrible mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. Which mistake exactly? The affair? The multiple affairs? Or stealing all our money? He flinched. I can explain about the money. It wasn't theft. I was making an investment opportunity that came up suddenly. I was going to surprise you with the returns. Really? And your text with Veronica about emptying the accounts and moving to California? Was that part of the surprise too? The color drained from his face. You saw those? I found your burner phone. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate when our life savings disappeared overnight? Thomas collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Veronica and I. It got complicated. But she ended things when the money ran out. When the money ran out? I repeated incredulously. You mean my money? Our money. I can fix this, he pleaded. Give me another chance. 10 years of marriage has to count for something. Remember how good we were together. Remember Paris? The night on the Seine when we promised we'd grow old together. For a moment I felt a pang of the love we once shared. But then I remembered my grandfather's letter. Thomas wasn't here because he loved me. He was here because his plan had failed. Where is the money, Thomas? He looked away. Most of it's gone. Veronica had expensive tastes. The trips. The gifts. And then there were some bad investment decisions. How much is left? Maybe 50,000? I can get it back to you. I'll work extra hours, take on more clients. I laughed bitterly. You stole over $500,000, and you think working extra hours will fix it? Just then the mail slot clicked, and an envelope slid through. The law firm's logo clearly visible on the corner. Thomas noticed it immediately, his body tensing. What's that? He asked, reaching for it. I got there first. It's from my grandfather's attorney. Thomas frowned. Your grandfather? But he's been gone for months. What would his attorney be sending now? I considered keeping my inheritance secret, but something in me needed to see his reaction. It seems my grandfather left me some money. Money? Thomas straightened, his demeanor shifting instantly. How much money? $450 million. Thomas stared at me, uncomprehending. Then he started laughing. That's not funny, Amber. This isn't the time for jokes. It's not a joke. I handed him the asset summary Mr. Friedman had left. My grandfather was secretly wealthy. Very wealthy. And he left everything to me. Thomas's hand shook as he reviewed the document, his eyes widening with each page. When he looked up, his expression had transformed completely, the desperation replaced by calculation. Amber, he said, his voice gentle now, reaching for my hand. This is amazing news. Think of what we could do together with this kind of money. The life we could have. I pulled my hand away. There is no we anymore, Thomas. You can't mean that. Everyone deserves a second chance. His eyes were pleading but focused on the papers rather than my face. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But I still love you. We can start fresh. Better than before. The trust is structured so you can't touch it, I said calmly. My grandfather made sure of that. Thomas's face hardened momentarily before he forced another smile. I don't care about the money, Amber. I care about us. About rebuilding what we had. What we had was a lie, I said quietly. You didn't just cheat on me once in a moment of weakness. You planned to leave me destitute. You plotted with your mistress to take everything we'd built together. That wasn't me, he insisted. I was confused, manipulated by Veronica. She pushed me to do things I never would have done otherwise. Lisa, who had been silently observing, finally spoke up. Are you seriously trying to blame your mistress for your choices right now? Thomas shot her a venomous look before turning back to me with softened eyes. Please, Amber. Send Lisa home so we can talk about this properly. As husband and wife. I've filed for divorce. I gave you a beautiful home, vacations, a lifestyle your nurse's salary could never provide. My salary paid for half of everything we have, I reminded him. And you took it all. Thomas stood, pacing the room like a caged animal. This is about the money, isn't it? You're punishing me because you suddenly have power. No, Thomas. This is about trust. You destroyed it. Fine, he spat. Mask fully dropped now. Divorce me. But I'm entitled to half of everything, including your inheritance. Actually, Lisa interjected, I believe the inheritance is protected as separate property, especially since it was explicitly structured that way. Right, Amber? Thomas's face contorted with rage. You think you've got it all figured out? You think you can just discard me now that you're rich? I made you who you are. No, I said, standing taller. My grandfather did that. And now I see why he kept his wealth a secret. He knew what kind of man you really are. You'll regret this, Thomas hissed. I'll contest the will. I'll tie you up in court for years. You'll pay me to go away in the end, it would be cheaper. I walked to the door and opened it. You should leave now. This isn't over. He threatened, moving toward me. Actually, it is. 2 security guards from the company I'd hired approached from their car in the driveway. These gentlemen will escort you off the property. Your belongings will be delivered to whatever address you provide my attorney. Thomas looked from me to the guards, disbelief etched on his face. You can't do this to me. I'm your husband. Not for long, I said firmly. Goodbye, Thomas. As the security team escorted him to his car, Thomas shouted back at me. You'll hear from my lawyer. I'm entitled to half of everything. Everything. I closed the door, leaning against it, exhausted but somehow lighter than I'd felt in years. Lisa put her arm around my shoulders. You okay? No, I admitted. But I think I will be. The divorce proceedings brought Thomas's true nature into sharp focus. My attorney, Judith Blackwell, a formidable divorce lawyer with a reputation for protecting women from financially abusive spouses, advised me to prepare for ugliness. Men like Thomas don't let go easily, she warned during our first meeting, especially when there's money involved. She was right. Thomas hired an aggressive attorney who immediately filed motions claiming entitlement to a portion of my inheritance. They argued that since Thomas had been my grandfather's close friend and advisor, he had contributed to the growth of the estate. Judith just smiled when she saw the filing. Your grandfather was brilliant. The trust documentation specifically names Thomas as an excluded party. It even references concerns about his financial motivations in the marriage. True to his threat, Thomas attempted to drag out the proceedings, demanding extensive financial discovery, and making increasingly outlandish claims about verbal promises my grandfather had supposedly made to him. The unexpected publicity was another challenge. Somehow, news of my inheritance leaked to local media. Boston nurse inherits fortune while cheating husband gets nothing, made headlines in tabloids and generated buzz on social media. Thomas seized the opportunity, giving interviews portraying himself as a devoted husband blindsided by unexpected divorce. I still love my wife, he told one reporter, tears in his eyes. This inheritance has changed her. Money changes people. I maintain my privacy, refusing all interview requests and focusing instead on rebuilding my life. During this chaotic period, a place to process my grief and betrayal away from prying eyes and legal battles, Lisa visited often, bringing groceries and moral support. One evening, as we sat on the dock watching the sunset, but I know I want to keep nursing. Really? You don't have to work another day in your life. That's exactly why I want to keep working, I explained. The money gives me freedom to do what matters, not freedom from doing anything at all. During those quiet weeks at the lake, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been suppressed during my marriage. I took up painting again, a passion I'd abandoned because Thomas found it messy and pointless. Watched Amber graduate nursing school today. One entry read, "Her parents would be so proud. She has their compassion and determination." Thomas seemed bored during the ceremony. I began meeting with financial advisors and philanthropy consultants. We developed a plan for a foundation in my grandfather's name focused on pediatric healthcare initiatives, combining his financial legacy with my passion for helping children. The Harold Jenkins Foundation for Children's Health launched 6 months after his death, with an initial endowment of $50 million dedicated to improving pediatric care in underserved communities. The divorce proceedings reached a critical point when Thomas's attorney requested a settlement conference. "They're ready to deal," Judith explained. "His case is falling apart and he knows it." In the conference room, Thomas looked diminished, the polished confidence replaced by bitter defeat. His attorney proposed a settlement. I said directly to Thomas, "Enough to start over, but not enough to reward your betrayal." His eyes narrowed. After 10 years of marriage? Thomas accepted $300,000 and signed comprehensive releases and non-disclosure agreements. Outside the conference room, I felt no triumph, only relief that this chapter was ending. The divorce was finalized 8 months after I discovered the affair. The media attention had mostly faded, and I was ready to fully embrace my new reality. Throughout this period, I maintained my nursing position, though I reduced my hours to accommodate foundation work. My colleagues were initially awkward around me after the news broke, but the discomfort faded as they saw I was still the same dedicated nurse I'd always been, just with more resources to help our patients. We created innovative programs that dramatically reduce wait times for critical pediatric procedures. The lake house became my permanent residence, with a small apartment in Boston for nights when I worked late shifts. I renovated my grandfather's modest home into a retreat center for pediatric nurses suffering from burnout. Thomas and Veronica's relationship had ended dramatically, according to mutual friends. She had apparently moved on to another executive at the firm, while Thomas struggled to rebuild his career after the scandal. Last I heard, he had taken a position at a much smaller financial firm with considerably less prestige and compensation. 1 year after discovering Thomas's betrayal, I sat with Lisa on my dock, watching another sunset over the lake. "Do you ever regret not giving him more in the settlement?" she asked. "He's certainly experiencing consequences now," Lisa remarked. "Jamie saw him working at that boutique firm in a tiny office. Said he looked miserable." "I don't wish him ill," I said truthfully. "I just don't wish him anything at all anymore." And that, I realized, was the most significant transformation of all. Reaching a place where Thomas no longer occupied any space in my heart. Already making measurable improvements in pediatric care access. I had recently approved funding for a mobile pediatric clinic serving rural communities in western Massachusetts. My personal life was evolving too. At a medical conference where I was representing the foundation, I met Dr. James Peterson, a pediatric surgeon whose dedication to his patients reminded me of my own commitment to nursing. Our conversations about healthcare inequities evolved into dinner discussions about books, travel, and eventually more personal matters. Unlike my whirlwind romance with Thomas, my connection with James developed slowly, thoughtfully. He knew about my inheritance from the beginning. It wasn't something I could hide, but showed far more interest in my nursing work than my financial status. "Money is just a tool," he said once. The woman I had become was so different from the devastated wife who discovered empty bank accounts just 1 year earlier. I was stronger, more confident, and infinitely clearer about what I wanted from life and relationships. My grandfather's final gift wasn't just financial security. It was the opportunity to discover who I truly was when everything familiar was stripped away. In losing what I thought was essential, I found something far more valuable, myself. It's been exactly 1 year since that devastating morning when I discovered our accounts were empty. The Harold Jenkins Foundation has become my passion project, already funding pediatric care initiatives in 27 states. We've established 7 mobile pediatric clinics serving rural communities, created a scholarship program for nursing students committed to pediatric care, and launched an innovative research grant focusing on rare childhood diseases that often receive inadequate funding. Despite having financial freedom, I still work 2 shifts per week in the pediatric oncology unit. Those hours grounding me in the reality of what truly matters: the courage of my young patients, the dedication of my colleagues. My relationship with James has continued to evolve naturally and authentically. Unlike Thomas, who always seemed to be performing the role of successful husband, James simply exists as himself, thoughtful, occasionally absent-minded, passionate about his work, and genuinely interested in mine. When he first visited the lake house, he spent an hour examining my grandfather's collection of first-edition mystery novels, completely losing track of time. "I hope I'm not being rude," he apologized. "It's just that these books, they tell a story about the man who collected them. That ability to see beyond the surface, to value substance over appearance, is what draws me to him." We're taking things slowly, both carrying lessons from past relationships. His divorce 5 years ago taught him similar lessons about compatibility and authentic connection. Thomas has faded from my life almost completely. According to mutual friends, he's still working at the smaller firm, struggling to rebuild his reputation in financial circles. I've realized that forgiveness isn't about absolving Thomas of responsibility or pretending his actions didn't wound me deeply. It's about freeing myself from carrying the weight of bitterness. I've forgiven him not for his sake, but for my own peace. My grandfather's wisdom continues to guide me through this new life. I often revisit his journals, finding new insights in his observations and experiences. He built his fortune quietly, focusing on value rather than appearance, substance over flash. Exactly the opposite of how Thomas lived. "True wealth," he wrote in one entry, "is measured not by what you have, but by what you give, what you build, and who you become in the process." With the bulk of the assets dedicated to improving children's healthcare access and outcomes, Lisa remains my closest friend and confidant. She recently joined the Foundation's board of directors, bringing her organizational skills and straight-talking perspective to our strategic planning. "You know what amazes me most about this whole story?" she said during a recent board retreat. "Had I known about the inheritance while still believing in my marriage, Thomas would likely have found ways to access those funds. My grandfather's delay in revealing my inheritance, whether intentional or coincidental, protected me in ways I couldn't have protected myself. Last month, I received a letter from a mother whose child received treatment through one of our foundation programs. Before your clinic came to our town," she wrote. "I keep that letter on my desk as a reminder of what really constitutes wealth, the ability to make a meaningful difference." As for Thomas, looking back at the woman I was a year ago, devastated, betrayed, believing my life was shattered beyond repair, I wish I could tell her that what felt like an ending was actually a beginning. That sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what you really need. The inheritance didn't fix my life. It simply gave me the freedom to rebuild it on my own terms, and the courage to live according to one's own principles rather than others' expectations. As I look out over the lake tonight, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and amber, I feel a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the financial security, but for the hard-won wisdom that no amount of money could buy. Have you ever experienced a moment when what seemed like your worst day turned out to be the beginning of something better? I'd love to hear your stories of unexpected beginnings in the comments below. And if you found something valuable in my journey, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel,